Well, hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. It's Kim and Kimberly.
Kim.
Do you know?
You go by Kimberly.
You
not
know
by
what?
Tim.
That actually just happened.
You
This
didn't mean
is
to do that.
Kimberly and Tim. Well, my family calls me Kim, or if you've known me since I was a kid, it's Kimmy. So that's how I alwaise know if
I've
it's
never
somebody.
called you either one.
Yeah, it's true. It's
unless
always
I'm
been
mad.
Kimberly.
Kim.
Kimberly.
Kimberly, Leanne.
Anyway, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. We are in part 2 on our podcast series about social personalities.
Yeah, social
which is one of my
personality.
favorite things to talk about.
Yeah, you do like this.
It's
kind
very
of stuff.
intriguing
You like
to me.
Enneagram stuff,
I
temperament
do.
stuff.
I do. I love the word too, Tim, but I also like,
I love the word, not the word personality, but the word of God.
The word of God. But I think that the cool part is that these marry, they actually work together. And so that's our desire, is to try to bring the two together. And so last week was an awesome podcast about that.
Yeah, we talked a lot about fall last time. It's even getting more.
Oh, yeah, the season of fall. I know. Look at you. You're the great white pumpkin today.
I'm
Stripes.
How's my pumpkin
I
look?
know. If you're listeling to us and you're not actually seeing us on YouTube, which you can watch us on YouTube, by the way.
Or
my
on our
husband,
website.
I'm wearing like I would
We're
say a
matches.
fall shade of a wrap, and you have on a orange and white striped shirt, and you have a very feminine pumpkin mug in your hand.
And you know what the really sad thing? I chose those mugs.
Yes.
Did you catch that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
So here we are in fall, but we're talking about social personalities. Let's kind of dive right into this because people are interested in this topic,
Yeah.
not just you.
Well, last week we talked about introverts, right?
Yeah, we did.
And kind of dove into that.
Yeah, and so what we're going to start out today is talking about misconceptions about extroverts, introverts, and ambiverts.
Right.
Not that easy to say right now.
Right.
But look, we're going to go through these, and maybe we'll just take turns hitting these. We wrote down several so that we can share
Misconceptions,
those.
yeah.
So one misconception is extroverts are more confident than introverts. Gosh, it seems that way.
Can I just tell you, I think often opposite is the truth. The more insecure a personality, the harder they drive to be extroverted and seem in control.
But I don't think, and we don't get in a debate here
Possibility.
on our podcast. Well, here's the thing. I think it doesn't have to do with their personality, their social personality. I think it has to do with character flaw. So when fear is the driver, we compensate by talking too much.
Good way to put it.
And one of the things, when I'm less confident, I talk louder. If you're talking loudly, you're either a loud talker, as Seinfeld used to say,
Yes.
or you are insecure about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes we compensate for insecurity by going.
I think that's
But
true.
I think when it relates to this, I think extroverts oftentimes in society are seen more confident than introverts, and that is a misconception. What's our next
Total
one?
misconception. Introverts and extroverts don't get along. Well, that's not true. They usually marry each other. So
we may be a case in fact.
Yes, right. Because I think I lean towards extroversion and you lean towards introversion, but you're, as we'll find out eventually, are more of an ambivert. And I think I'm leaning towards ambivert too. But when we first got married, I was
starting to
definitely
look alike. We're starting to talk
dress
alike. Yeah, we're doing the pumpkin
We both have
thing.
gray hair now.
Hey, wait a minute. Settle down. All right, so that's really true. The idea that extroverts and introverts don't get along is really not true, but it does create a challenge. We talked about that last time. When you are talking about your social personality interacting with your spouse, you need to make sure that you talk about that, because if you don't, you won't get along. You need to know that your introverted spouse is not resisting you. They're just struggling with the fact of an event that is uncomfortable for them. So another one is introverts don't care for people. And it appears that somebody that's extroverted because they're more gregarious, or oftentimes they're more gregarious in parties. They'll talk to several people.
Connect more.
An introvert may only talk to one or two people at a party. Right. So that is seen sometimes as, that they don't care about people, but in fact they do.
Oh my goodness. And
What's
I
next
would
one?
say, I would just say introverts probably are more actively caring for less people than extroverts care for, they'll be in a room and hit all the different places, but an introvert tends to be more intentional with their care and are deeply caregivers.
Yeah, so there was a leadership. I don't know if it was a personality thing, but it was called DISC, and
Test.
a D was someone who was a director, and an I is someone who is an influencer. The S is steady, and I've forgotten the C right now. What is that? Let's see. It doesn't
Communication.
matter. Nope, that's not it. But anyway, the point of that being that each one of those four categories, people, it's not that their personality so much, it's how they see themselves interacting in a social setting or in a leadership role. So I'm a director.
Right.
And but I'm somewhat a little more introverted than a lot of directors. You're a high I, which is an influencer. What you bring to a situation is influence. That's how you motivate people. I tell people what to do. Believe me.
I try.
Yeah. So this idea that introverts don't care for people, it's just not true. It's just that introverts will show how they care differently, just like in the DISC or in the Enneagram.
Right.
We approach life differently.
Right.
We approach people differently.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
we do care.
Yeah. Another couple of misconceptions about introverts are that they tend to be fearful of people. That is not true. Only introverts are loyal and extroverts will move on quickly. So that, introverts are fearful of people. We know that's not true. Or only introverts are loyal. So you think because they are more intentional, they're quieter, they're going to be ones that, are going to be the most loyal friends. And that's not necessarily true. That's a misconception.
Yeah. Here's another one. Extroverts are glib.
Right.
And lack deep social connection. We're not hitting all these, but think about that. When you think of an extrovert, you think of somebody that's talking on a very surface level. That's not true. They can go very deep and have deep social connections.
Yeah, let's just hit these off because we've got so many of them. Extroverts, these are misconceptions. Once again, extroverts don't think before they speak, whereas introverts are careful with their words.
No, both sides can
do
speak
that.
without
That's
thinking.
That's right. Or extroverts don't like to be alone. Now, I do think that tends to be a thing, but not always. We have to be careful not put people under labels or in boxes, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that we said is public speakers, we've always thought they were extroverts, but that's just not true. That's they may or may not be extroverts. I've known a lot of pastors. In fact, I think the most that I know are more introverted.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on them, but introverts don't have friends. That's just not true. They have deep and meaningful friendships. So do extroverts.
Or that they're shy.
Yeah.
Which when you think of shyness, you think of maybe fear-based, something that's fear-based. It's actually about social drive, know?
Right.
And that, or maybe extroverts are never lonely. That's definitely not true. Yeah. People often who are in the public eye and known as extroverts are deeply lonely.
Right.
And that's something that can affect everybody, obviously. So let's talk about trusted friends. There's a important thing to remember is that to have true connection, usually that happens with about 1 to 3 people, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
In your life, and I'm saying even outside of just your spouse and family, maybe 1 to 3 people is usually what most people need or would be ideal.
Have you ever been at a party and somebody goes, "This is my BFF,
Yeah.
my best friends for forever."
Yeah.
Right. That's what BFF means. And then a few minutes later, they introduce you to another friend. They go, "This is my BFF." I go, "Wait a minute, you got best friend over there, and then you got another best friend here. How many best friends do you have?" Everybody's a best friend, Well, if that means literally a best trusted friend, that's not going to wash.
Right.
That's just not going to wash.
Right. I think what happens is, and what's more realistic, because we do know, we've talked about this before, that to have a true friendship, it requires quite a bit of you, a time investment, and a time investment over time. So it's not an intimate relationship, friendship like that doesn't come quickly. It's developed over time. Right. So that requires a lot of time and investment. But most often, it's difficult to manage more than 3 of those. And if you have 3, that's awesome. And I like to say it like this. It's like an inner circle. You have it's like dropping a stone into water and how the waves circle out. You have the very, very close circle around you, which is your spouse, your family, hopefully. Yeah. And then there's another circle, and would be your most trusted good friends. Right. And that's a small circle, right? It's still small. And as it goes out, you get your circles of influence that grow, and they're meaningful, but they could never fill that space of the most close friends.
I think it was not too long ago we talked about this verse in Proverbs 18:24. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Think about that. The power of that is that deep connection where there's trust, there's reliability, there's loyalty. And I believe that there's a lot of people that you can trust, but to have a confidant or 2 is really powerful. And I don't think you don't have many of those. If you do, it's unusual.
So what is loyalty of a trusted friend? What does that look like? We wrote down 4 different things. One is the trust for confidence, that you can have confidence in them.
Not only confidence, but they will keep what you tell them confidential.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have confidence in them, and they will keep it confidential, right?
Yes. And then another one is tolerance, to have a level of tolerance because if you're actually, quote unquote, doing life together, you're going to go through highs and lows. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to stumble. You're going to get back up again.
Yeah. You think about somebody who is going to share with you their darkest secret, and you share that only with a trusted friend, not with your 20 BFFs, but your one trusted friend. You're going to need them to be able to tolerate what that weakness in your life, and
they may already know it.
And the next one is to accept you. So not only do they hold it in confidence and they tolerate your differences, and you're right, they probably already know it. But that acceptance, to have that acceptance of that person, and you trust them to be able to do the correction, instead of just keeping you, enabling you. We have it on a list of podcasts to hit one time. And I'm writing a book on this about how to rescue people who are struggling, and where does empathy factor into that? And I do want to do a whole series. We want to do a whole series on empathy and sympathy. I think empathy is highly overrated. The biblical concept is sympathy, but empathy, where you say, I have so much empathy, I'm going to let you stay stuck in your life. If you really have compassion for that person,
and love,
you love them where they are and move them forward in growth.
Right.
So when you have a trusted friend, that's somebody that you can really trust, that's not only going to keep confidence, be able to tolerate your idiosyncrasies, to accept you in the process of growth, and love you enough to accept you where you are, but to move you forward into your growth.
I feel like if we could put all of those in one word, it would be safety.
Safety, absolutely.
Safety in the relationship for all of those things. Because even to be corrected by someone that loves you is a very challenging thing to do. But when you feel safe with someone and they're bringing correction to your life, it's life-giving. You don't reject them when you feel safe and you have the love and the security of that relationship, then and that safety, then you receive the correction well,
Yeah. One of the things, and we talked about introversion last week, and we're talking about being an extrovert this week. And here's a word of warning to you extroverts, to those of us that are extroverts, I'll put it that way. So I'm kind of correcting myself or challenging myself. Ephesians chapter 4 gives what I would call is the directive to the church. Now, the prime directive for every believer, every follower of God, is to love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, right? That's the prime directive of life for a Christian. But the church's prime directive, or the directive of the church, is found in Ephesians 4:1. It says this: I, therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of your calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing one another in love. And I didn't write this down, but if I remember it pretty close to verbatim, is, and maintaining the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the directive.
Yeah.
Now, you can't do that without character. And here's the warning to extroverts. There are character traits that if you're an extrovert, you have to work a little harder to be mindful. And that is humility, gentleness, patience, and bearing one another, bearing with one another. So I think what I would put them in the categories of social rules.
The things to abide by. Yeah.
What and just let's think about like the overriding rule of life. You create safety when you respect people.
Right. That's
so what
so
are
good.
some of the things that we can respect?
So let's talk about respect first. I would say for privacy, that's really key. Regardless of your temperament type, your personality type, the respect for the privacy of your friend, your partner,
or a neighbor.
A neighbor. Absolutely.
Or somebody at church.
Yeah.
If you're an extrovert, you a lot of times think everybody wants to share at the level that you do.
Right.
But some
That's
people
true.
don't want to share, so they're going to, like we were talking to a neighbor who had traveled and is back from a 2-year
job
out of the country. Yeah, 2-year job. And we're out in the front yard. We're doing a walk, and we just come up against that. Not against, but next to that guy, and we're talking to him, and I can see there's a little bit of hesitation there, and I'm thinking he's probably a little more introverted.
Yeah.
And you got to maintain privacy. We had just met the guy and known him briefly, but I remembered a lot about him: his name, his son's name, where they went to school.
Yeah.
I didn't remember his wife's name, but I remembered where they were on this trip and what country they were in and what he does. And he's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's your name?
You're not creepy at all. Do you have a journal on me?
But and I,
and you were feeling like a winner because that memory was showing up.
But there's something, I don't know what it is, but in our neighborhood, I'm like Mr. Extrovert.
Which is so funny.
It is funny because normally I wouldn't be that way. But
we have together lived in 3 neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And this is the first time you've ever been that socially interactive.
Yeah.
I think it's been very proactive on your part as an introvert, though, to connect with our neighbors.
Yeah.
And in the past, that was not something you challenged yourself on.
Right.
And so now that you're on walks every day with the dogs and stuff, I've been super proud of you.
what I will call it, I'm a functional extrovert in my
well,
neighborhood.
you've found purpose in it.
And yet I got to be very careful how much I push, because I think, people want to be open like me. We want to be neighborly. And
privacy matters.
I met somebody the other day. Her name is Soul, and she lives in the neighborhood, her and her husband. And I started asking questions. I'm like, I think maybe I'm pushing a little too far.
Yeah.
Because they both backed off a little bit. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
They've shared enough. I know who they are.
Yeah.
And, I'll never talk to them again. No, they just, I could see there was a barrier. What else?
Well, which leads to the next one, respect for boundaries. Yeah. Maybe in the conversation, especially in the day we live in, people are protective. We don't know what kind of information is going to be used against us, Even in neighborhoods, I'm on a neighborhood chat and neighborhood watch, and everyone is so afraid to give too much information for fear that they will be attacked for certain decisions they've made or positions they take, and it makes sense because that's the same happens in social media. So it's important to have respect for boundaries.
Yeah, I've had people come up to me at parties and say, "Hey, I want you to introduce you to this guy." I'm like, I really kind of don't want to. But I don't say that.
Yeah.
And then later on, they're trying to get me to introduce to another person and another person, and I realize that's an extrovert trying to get me to be an extrovert.
Right, right.
And I think when you respect somebody's boundaries, and to the extroverts that are listening, be careful to respect the boundaries. Say, would you be comfortable meeting this guy?
That's a good way to put it.
Instead of saying, hey, I want to introduce you. Okay, you may want the world, but you're not going to get it because I'm sitting right here.
Sipping my tea.
Yeah, right.
So the next one would be respect for time. Oh my gosh, this is huge. Yeah. Respecting someone's schedule, time, commitments. That's one of the things that's always bugged both of us.
I got to tell a story about a guy, and I'll relate this in a way that nobody will know who or where or what. But anyway, somebody, I knew this guy, and we were in a meeting together, and I'll do this real quickly. But the meeting was over, and he's a talker. He's a total extrovert, and he's a talker. And he walks me out to the car, and he's talking to me at the car. And when I'm standing there, I'm like, I want to go home. It's late, and it's dark outside. So I finally open my door, and he keeps talking and talking, and then I sit down in my car. He keeps talking and talking. He's just not getting the clues. The social clues are, I'm out of here, and you're not getting the clues. And then I roll down my window and close my door because I didn't want to be rude. And he keeps talking and talking. I literally did not say. I said several times, I got to go, but he's not hearing it. And then I start backing up, and he literally is walking next to the car.
Oh my gosh!
While I'm driving backwards, he's walking, and he's talking, and then I put it in forward, and he's walking next to me. I go, "Hey, bro, I gotta go. I gotta go." And I'm like, "Okay, see you later." He goes, "Okay, great talk." No, you talked. You didn't respect my time.
Right? Yeah. Time out.
Yeah.
So the next one is respect for values. I think this is good because we need to know that we can have different values with friends and still respect them as a person, even if it's not a shared value. So, and I feel like, again, this is something we're missing in the world right now, is that we can still love people well and disagree on things.
Right. Yep.
And if we can get back to that and we have dear friends that do not share similar values with us, but they're still dear friends. And I think that's so important. That's because we respect them as people. And so we respect that they have their own values. It's okay.
And you can have a difference, a moral difference with somebody, a spiritual difference, a philosophical, a political difference, whatever it is. But if you truly love people, you won't push over the top of their values. And I think I'm not saying that extroverts tend to do that. I'm just saying if you're an extrovert, sometimes the connection is such high value that we forget about respecting people's privacy, boundaries, time, and values.
And then another one to throw in there is property. That's obvious. Respect people's property. That's for everybody. The next one is respect for lifestyle choices, even when you disagree, which I just said.
Talking about, So, and I think it's really important, and we wrote this down in having humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, fulfilling this directive of producing unity. You got to listen to the cues. Learn what drives somebody in their interaction, especially if you're an extrovert. Listen to the heart of an introvert. Listen to the heart of a ambivert. And not everybody sees life like you, or not everybody sees social life like you. True for both sides of that.
Thank God for that. Yeah. And then I think the most important thing is that we need to lean into love. That should be the foundation of all of our circles of influence and friendships, is that we lean into love. The goal would be to, with our words and our behavior, to build a bridge that is easy to cross over and not a wall, right? So we're not shutting people down, conversations down, emotionally shutting them down, but that we are creating a safe space for us to build a bridge to be able to share those thoughts and communicate, and a safety. Once again, it comes in safety.
I think one of the things too, and we'll close with this idea that how people interact and how they problem solve. So an introvert will tend to problem solve on their own.
Right.
A extrovert will tend to problem solve in a team.
Everybody's opinion.
And, I sit in team meetings or committee meetings or board meetings. And I mean, that's what I do. I sit on boards, and, sometimes there's just 2 or 3 talkers in most of those situations. But it's really difficult if you're an introvert to team or problem solve in a team. But everybody has their way of doing it. Here's what I do as an introvert, more of an ambivert. What I have a tendency to do is listen to other people's views, go and think about those things, try to resolve those things, and then come back to the team and then begin to share that. But I have a tendency, and I have to be careful about this, is I've made up my mind. And if you make up your mind, you're not going to listen to other people's views. So keep an open heart and an open mind as an extrovert, an introvert, or an ambivert. Now, next time, we'll come back together and talk about introvert, extrovert, and ambivert, how they interact with each other, how those all come together. So in our last episode on this, we'll pull that together and really talk about what it means to be an ambivert. Thanks so much for listening. We're so honored, by the way, that you listen to our podcast. There's a lot of podcasts out there. We are podcasters. We love listening to podcasts. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Hope Rescue Podcast.
Bye, guys.